Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the BlkWmnAnimator, coming back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Jennifer McSpadden. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So, Jennifer, can you give like a little bio about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, Jennifer McSpadden. I currently live in Los Angeles. My current role as a senior motion capture supervisor at Goodbye Kansas Studios. I do a lot of virtual production. My background has been mostly in motion capture, and then I started out in grade school doing live news broadcasts. So I've been trying to stay in the film industry and entertainment industry for a long time.
Nice. My first question, where are you from and how was it growing up?
Yeah, so originally I'm from a suburb outside of Atlanta, Snellville. So I grew up there. I was born in Philadelphia, but I was in Atlanta for most of my childhood, up until going to college in Savannah, Georgia. So definitely been in Georgia for a very long time. We grew up our parents looked around for good public school systems. So I ended up being fortunate enough to grow up around a very good public school district and was around a lot of it was definitely a more affluent area. You definitely had over time I saw the diversity change, but definitely a more so Caucasian neighborhood than your average in Atlanta, which opened the door, I would say, to some interesting opportunities related to school because of the amount of funding coming into that district. So growing up there was definitely interesting. My mom is white, my dad is Black. So we definitely got some interesting looks from people growing up, some questions. My dad worked graveyard shifts, so I was often with my mom and my sister. And I was often asked if I was adopted. We often got those questions, but rarely were people treating us poorly. It was just more of a question of a look like, oh, they look different, it was that kind of reaction. But in the big picture, I had a good experience in the South, as good as you can probably have, I would think. Definitely, I recognize that as a blessing, an exception. But yeah, I grew up there. We like I said, had really amazing resources at our school. We had a full live broadcast system at our school, which was really special to be able to kind of have the opportunity to hone skills at a young age, which I took advantage of. My sister's a performer. She was very active in musical theater there. So we definitely had a really good childhood. It's just my sister and I. So we remained very close. So that's great. And then I went to school in Savannah, Georgia for college. I was there for my undergrad and grad studies. And then eventually my parents and my sister moved out to Las Vegas, kind of leaving me all alone in Georgia. And then I was like, all right, I got to finally move out west. So in the last couple of years, I joined them out here. They're by Las Vegas. I'm in LA, so we're still really close. But yeah, that's been kind of the journey out west, the long journey.
So with doing the broadcasting, did you originally have a different career that you wanted to do, or was the broadcasting like more of a hobby and you didn't think you were going to do it as a career?
Well, I would say that when I first saw the first Lord of the Rings movie in the theater, I said, I don't care what I have to do. I don't care if I'm, running coffee. I don't care if I'm cleaning up. I'm going to be on movie sets. Like that was my decision. And that was like the 9th grade, I want to say. So I saw that we had the live broadcast class and I thought this might be the closest thing I can do to film production right now. So that's kind of the reason why I got into it. I didn't necessarily want to do news. Live news, but I was able to learn video editing. Like we had very early Avid systems there to edit, and got to direct the shows. So I definitely got really into the live broadcast. But my goal was always to eventually transition into film school and focus in that direction. So it was more of a stepping stone. Definitely a very active hobby in a way. But I think I was one of the weird ones that knew what they wanted to do right away, and stuck with it. So. Yeah.
So do you have anything else in like your art, animation, media journey as like in your childhood? Were you creative in any other ways?
It's funny. That was my one outlet. I was definitely more of the math and science kid. I was, calculus, physics. I was going in that direction. I never drew, or I tried to, and I was really bad at it. So when I started art school down at SCAD in Savannah, that's where I went. I had to take initial like intro to drawing classes, color theory classes, and I think I got decent grades because I tried really hard. It definitely didn't have the background. I was not the kid. Yeah, for sure. I was never doodling. It was never that. So that was a new world to me, the artistic part of it, the technical, like, engineering part of it made sense to me. So I had to retrain what I was doing. I always took a lot of photographs when we took on vacations and stuff. So that was probably the most creative thing I did in my free time without really thinking about it. But it never really drew, never painted. Nothing like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, actually, were your parents supportive of your artistic, creative interests?
Yeah, very much so. My parents are musicians. So I think they went through the, what are you going to do for a real job kind of thing from their parents. So I think I definitely was experienced that blessing to be able to have parents that were like, go for it, Jen, like do your thing. Like I always had very real talk, especially from my father, about what it meant to, be financially stable, to function, to be able to like, play the game. Like, you got to like plan for things, but he never discounted what I wanted to do. He always knew that like, you're probably going to find a way to do this and be successful at it. So I'm not worried about what you're doing. It's just how you're doing it is how I'm going to give my advice. So I appreciate that. And like for my sister as well, like as a singer, a performer, we've both had that support because my parents went through it, and they went through that without, I guess, going as far in their career as we've been able to. So they understand what it means to go for it and what it means to have to step away from art and get that real job to make the money. So they were able to give us amazing advice and perspective when it comes to cultivating an artistic career and how to do that successfully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not on Twitter much, but I remember being on Twitter maybe a few weeks ago, and I saw some tweet where the lady was talking about how her child had went and did something artistic and how they were kind of a failure. And that made me want to tweet like, most times artistic people are failures because their journey includes not being supported, not getting the resources, and then their parents call them a failure at the end when they didn't even help them do it like in any type of better way. They're like downing them the whole time, and it's like, no wonder they're unsuccessful.
It's true. And it's like any other career, like you need the support of your family, you need the support of your community. I remember going to my first year at university, coming back and seeing old friends. And because I went to art school, they were asking questions like, well, do you guys just use crayons and paint and draw all day? And I'm like, oh yeah, totally. That's what we do all day long. Like there's, I think, an attitude about creative careers from people that it's like some kind of easy way out, or it doesn't take nearly as much dedication or intellect or something. I don't know where it comes from, because I noticed that most people that critique it have never tried to do that kind of thing themselves.
Yeah, the cognitive dissonance is real, because it's like there's a dichotomy of understanding that they can't draw and can't do it, but then thinking it's easy. Like, what?
Right.
I don't what?
Right. I don't do that about your career. Like, I'm not going to discount what you're up to. Like, but yeah, but then everybody consumes the results that artists create. So there's definitely a value to what we do. They just, people don't seem to value or understand the process. They just want to see the outcome and put a price tag on the outcome, which I think is really interesting.
So, you got a bachelor's in film. I know, like when I went to college, there was only like 3 colleges I could pick from, because I wanted to do animation and sports, and art animation schools don't have sports, so it was like RIT, which is where I went, SAD or St. Clair College in Canada.
Right.
So I was just like, and then I ended up not playing basketball because I didn't like the coach. But anyway, so at SAD, were you able to, like with getting the film degree, were you able to kind of tailor it to what you were interested in? How does the degree program work, and how did you like take advantage of it?
Yeah, that is a very good point. There are just a handful of schools to choose from, especially on the East Coast. Like that was a big deal too. It's a 4-year program for the Bachelor's of Fine Arts. So we were able to have a good amount of electives to be able to explore other departments. And what I appreciated about that program, at least when I went through it, 2005 to 2009 for undergrad, there were prerequisites, but they weren't required to happen right away. So as long as they happened before the class that you needed to have them for, you could kind of spread things out. So I was able to take my first film class my second quarter there. It's a quarter system versus semesters. But as a freshman, I was in my first class within my major. I noticed at some other schools, you kind of had to wait till almost like your second year, do all your prereqs first. So I appreciated that because I felt like I was able to spend 4 years on my major as opposed to maybe 2.5 or something, it kind of felt like I was going to have some other places. So that was really, really beneficial. And we had some great resources at that school, like a really amazing equipment checkout system, like a whole like rental house. And there were level systems to what you could take out from that inventory. So we were able to, if you could work with somebody at a higher level, then you could get your hands on equipment sooner. So they definitely made it a little easy for people to find ways to do that extra work or go that extra mile right away. I thought that was great. And being in a city like Savannah without a traditional closed campus, I definitely appreciated what it meant to feel a little bit more independent right away. I was 17 when I started because of my late birthday. So to be there in a residence hall, going through the city to get to the different buildings, it definitely felt more like I was like a grown up out on my own, So I appreciated that, but it also it made the film department very interesting because being there without a car at first in a city, taking equipment and like lugging it down the sidewalk, through the city back to where you need to shoot, like definitely made you feel like you were doing some kind of like guerrilla filming. Like I think we're getting in the trenches right away, but it was good. It was definitely offered a really interesting perspective, and the city is beautiful. So all you had to do was turn your camera on and shoot, and you've got something gorgeous to turn in. So that was a nice benefit as well.
Yeah, it sounds like RIT's program is kind of similar to SCAD. I know. I'm guessing it's more beneficial, quote unquote, to maybe go to more of an artistic school than a liberal arts school. Because I remember our freshman year, they were like, "Yeah, we're better than NYU because you get cameras your first year."
I looked at NYU. You're right. Yeah, I thought about that.
Because like our first quarter, we did a Bolex camera, which is you got to wind it for power, and then like the digital camera second quarter, and then we did digital the third quarter, but we concentrated on like sound design or whatever. But because I went for animation, it was cool that I got to have my first 3D class my spring quarter of freshman year. So
that's great.
I think I was one of the only freshmen maybe in that class, but that was really cool because at RIT in the film and it's called SOFA, School of Film and Animation. So like everybody does film the first year and then everybody kind of goes off to their thing the second year. So unless you made friends with the film students and maybe worked on their projects, which I feel like I should have done more, to be honest, you don't really interact with the film people too often after when you go to sophomore year. So
gotcha. That's so important though, to start out with the same foundation.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. That's something that we often talked about at SCAD, like wishing that we had more required, storyboarding classes as film majors, or that, the vis effects majors were over with us more, like we wish that we had a bit more cross-departmental. I think they've changed that since because of those needs. But yeah, it's so important to understand the other parts of the pipeline that are going to affect you eventually and take some of those courses to be able to communicate better. I think we would have had more, interdepartmental projects as a result had we been a bit more active together right away, as opposed to waiting till our senior project to finally like scout people out,
So is Savannah known for being haunted?
Yes. Oh yes.
Anything like that?
Yes. At first I thought it was like, part of the tourist trap, like, oh, okay, yeah, had a lot of Confederate history here, of course, but I saw some things there. I really did. Things that I was not prepared for. When things kind of hit you in a place of absolute ignorance, it's like, I couldn't have made that up. Like, I wasn't even there's no way that was
I have no
something that
context for this story.
no
Makes
prior
it really hard.
experience. Yeah, I definitely saw some stuff. And the dorm that I was in my first 2 years, notoriously had a couple ghosts in it. Like it was
Mhm.
on the ghost tour stop. Like they would stop in front of our dorm and point up and say, this, and this happened there. So I think that I had a couple experiences specifically. They're kind of longer stories, but it
Yeah.
made me more of a believer than I thought I was, honestly. But I did this summer. I was a residence assistant
Mm,
for
mhm.
3 of the years I was there for undergrad, and I did the summer programs as well. So we would take, because it was a bunch of minors over the summer, we would go on these tours with them, and I have some of the ghost tours memorized by now because I went on so many of them because of the summer
Yeah.
programs, and
Mhm.
it's crazy how like everywhere you turn in Savannah, there's some kind of elaborate story that happened at this building
Mhm.
or in that square, and yeah, I think it might be legitimate.
So, what made you kind of get the two separate degrees, like one in film and then the master's is in visual effects? So, was that the original plan, or how did you decide that?
I hadn't I hadn't initially planned to do grad school going through undergrad. I
Mhm.
focused on film editing in undergrad, and I was on set doing script supervision. And when I finished, I was thinking, I without making a major move and major life change, I don't know what to do now. Because I wasn't going the directing route, I wasn't acting, I wasn't a producer, I didn't have any family in the industry,
Mhm.
immediate context. I'm like, I don't know where to go with this right away. So I feel like there's more to this and that I want to understand. And because I was focusing so much on post production with film and a little bit of sound, I was like, I think I need to understand a bit more about the post production process in general. And that's what kind
Mhm.
of made me look at the visual effects major. Um, and when I got into it, I kept thinking, man, I should have taken more of these electives
Mhm.
as opposed to like I took some electives that I wanted to try, but I think I should have focused more on that because it was
Yeah.
so much more related to what I was doing within film.
Mhm.
Um, and then within that, I took like one Maya class total, like in my all of my undergrad. So that was a
Mhm.
complete 180 in my understanding to get into 3D space,
Yeah.
to kind of wrap my head around all that. But I dove right into that because I wanted to understand what the other departments were going to end up doing around me. Like, how
Yeah.
do I communicate with the compositors? How do I communicate with texture artists, lighters? And then as part of the electives that were part of the master's program, I was able to take motion capture classes and understand animation a bit more. And
Mhm.
that really sparked my interest. I was like, I really wish I had done this sooner,
Yeah.
Um, I took like a Steadicam class in undergrad. Like I took some of those types of classes, which were really great, but it's like that's not really what I wanted to focus on as much.
Mhm.
So that's kind of why I wanted to round out my understanding of post production, and that's paid off so much.
Yeah.
I definitely use all this. I use a lot of the skills on still editing from undergrad, but it was really the master's program that made me realize, where I was like made me see where I could fit into all of this.
Yeah. Um. So I always say, like, all forms of animation are tedious. You just have to find the tedious tasks that you like. So what
Mhm.
tediousness in the animation VFX industry do you love?
I within motion capture, I really got into what it meant to track
Mhm.
shots.
Yeah.
So yeah, like because you're tracking and identifying every single marker throughout an entire take for every single frame. Like that has to be as accurate as possible. And
Mhm.
depending on the software you use, sometimes it's automated, sometimes you're sitting and doing it by hand. And
Mhm.
I know for on my first when I first got out of school, I worked at giant studios, profile studios,
Mhm.
for motion capture, and sometimes they had shows where they were capturing and couldn't put mocap cameras up, so they had to use the footage, and we were hand tracking that footage
Mhm.
to create the data that you would have usually had for capture, and then letting that drive a CG character. So it was all image based.
Yeah.
That was like you are kind of sitting in there and frame by frame,
Mhm.
following all the major points on like a fractal suit of an actor.
Mhm.
It's very tedious, but I just it was so rewarding in the end that I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
this is nice. I don't mind this.
Yeah.
I'm also a big spreadsheet nerd. Like if I can spreadsheet it, I'm going to do it, and it's going to be amazing. So I mean, that kind of data entry, I don't know. I don't mind it. I've always
Yeah.
been more okay with the tedious things, but yeah, I think I find that a bit more rewarding than like having to label 1,000 cables, like, there's some things I'm like, I just can't do that right now.
Mhm.
But
So can you explain like tracking and what it is in relation to whatever?
sure. Or just mocap in general. Like I
Mhm.
can definitely give a quick rundown of what that is, and some of the major steps of it. So you have cameras that are often that are throwing infrared light onto what are often like reflective markers on a person. If they're not actively sending a signal, they're just reflective, like 3M tape at a
Mhm.
certain size, and the cameras are dialed in to really only look for the absolute highlights in an image. So it looks
Okay.
like security camera footage that's been like turned way down. So once those cameras are calibrated, they're triangulated, they're all converging on points in the same space. After you do all of your captures, you then take that data and have to track the data. And that means every single there's labels or IDs of each marker. Like this is the head marker, this one's on the right shoulder, that kind of thing. And you would make sure that the IDs for the markers are accurate on every frame of the entire range of whatever take you need. Like it may be the
Mhm.
whole take. If you have client input, it's a portion of it. And you
Mhm.
would go through and make sure that those IDs are accurate throughout as best as possible. And if there are times where that marker is occluded and you can't see it, you would kind of have to either compensate for it or plan to edit through that later. But once the IDs are properly labeled, you would then export that. I'm a giant Lightstorm capture specialist. So
Mhm.
within that software, there's a refining step that kind of puts very, very very specific smoothing passes along and filters along that data, so it looks a bit more naturalistic and less jittery, less
Yeah.
prone to a camera's, trying to like, it's right here, it's this
Yeah.
pixel, it's that pixel. So it kind of gives it a little bit of smoothing pass. Then you take it into editing software similar to Motion Builder within that suite, and you
Okay.
finish editing all of that out. And then you get more into more traditional animation concepts for editing, but you are dealing with a keyframe on every frame on every bone. So it's a lot more data to deal with. So what we end up doing is making kind of sweeping changes versus taking keyframes out and then blending back between them. We kind of take major moments and then redraw curves between them so that it all stays intact.
Yeah.
And then, so our turnover to our clients are often, fully baked animation, and then they can decide to reduce that keyframe density on their end if they like.
Yeah.
But so for us, it's usually that very heavy amount of data that we're dealing with the entire time.
Nice.
And yeah.
So I definitely believe that any type of person can do any type of job, but what kinds of interests could people have that might be interested in like visual effects or motion capture? Like what kind of person would possibly be interested?
Right. Well, to the point of, or the question of what tedious tasks do you like, you got to be able to be okay with tedious tasks. I think that's something that's definitely a certain type of person.
Yeah.
If that kind of thing infuriates you, you probably shouldn't go this way, because it's going to be like that sometimes.
Yeah.
I've noticed people that can communicate really well, especially in written form. That's very
Mhm.
important. Leaving notes for each other, having very specific conversations with clients, especially for VisFX vendors. Unless you're working at a big studio where you're making your own content within house, you're often
Mhm.
dealing with other studios,
Yeah.
other people that don't speak your language, that don't know what you're doing. There's definitely a level of technical communication that needs to be clear. You need to be able to like. I also feel like going through the master's program, we had to often turn in our homework in the form of a website with a full breakdown of what we did. So being able to document what you did, being able to
Mhm.
like to communicate through screen grabs, through illustrations, through written formats, through video demonstrations. There's a lot of I feel like a lot of analysis of what you do, and you have to be able to describe that to other people in order to get
Yeah.
on the same page.
Yeah.
I think that's very important. And I also, I'd say half of what I've done so far has been on set. And being on set is in a whole other ballgame of the type of person you have to be. There's
Mhm.
definitely you have to set your ego aside when you go on set. There's definitely a hierarchy amongst people on set, but there's definitely also we are all part of a team. We have a collective goal in mind, and if you need help and I can help you, I'm going to jump in and do it, regardless of the position I'm in. Like, not like, oh, that's beneath my job title to do that task. That doesn't exist as much on set, I've noticed. So there's definitely that kind of transition. And I noticed that a lot of people in post-production, there's definitely a certain type of person that you often find behind the computer. And sometimes that isn't the same type of person that you find out on set. So being able to be a chameleon is also very important. Like, I need to be able to talk to like the more introverted computer people. You know what I mean? Like, that's the type of person. I can be that person sometimes. And I also need to be like the super, like, on top of my stuff, talking to everybody, very communicative, very enthusiastic person that you need to be on stage sometimes. So I think a lot of it is, can you act those roles out to be able to deal with very different types of teams and communicate very differently at times? I mean, obviously, on top of your technically knowing what you're doing, that's obviously helpful, but it's more of a personality thing that makes or breaks whether or not you can excel and move up.
Yeah, I can imagine how hard it is to communicate with people who don't really know what you're doing. I feel like I had to do that when I worked for the state of Louisiana as an animation specialist, because I'm working with like engineers, subject matter experts, people in government that like don't know what animation is. And I remember like one key thing that made me realize when you're communicating with people who aren't in the industry, like the definition of words. There was one project I was working on where they used the word animation, but they meant image. And so that's two totally different things. And then we had to kind of reel back and like, oh, they meant image, so let's give them images. And then I was in a meeting like, oh, where are the animations? I'm like, well, we realized that you actually meant images initially, so we're not doing animations anymore because you used the wrong word. And so they're like, what? And then when you show somebody more, then it's like to bring it back. It's like, what? You can't do that to people. So it's like making sure that, okay, is this what you actually mean? Because people not in the animation industry will call a illustrated image an animation. It's like, that's not what an animation is.
Right. Not like a 2D Disney animator. Like, there's a difference. Like, I think, it's so hard because you have to also find a way of doing that without like making them feel like they're being condescended to, Like, I'm simply defining what my job title is and what my department does. I'm not trying to make you feel some kind of way. Yeah. That's tough. Oh yeah.
So can you kind of define what a motion capture supervisor and a virtual production specialist is?
Sure. So within motion capture, specifically, you'll often have either two teams or a team that kind of has two tasks. You have the onset team that handles the capture from the beginning. Like, it starts from once your actor's suited up, putting markers on that actor, calibrating them, making sure the space is calibrated itself to be able to receive accurate data. You've got people that are running around on the floor, making sure that markers, when they fall off, get replaced. People at different computers running different aspects of it. And then there's often somebody who's on the floor kind of calling the shots, like who's out there talking to the director, who's listening in, working with maybe the virtual camera operator and saying, okay, here's what's next. We're moving on to this. We need you to swap these props out. Okay, this actor's almost done. So it's kind of somebody who's like stage directing in a way. And that's often what the supervisor ends up doing. That's my role now. I was often the person at the computer running the capture software before, and also defining the volume before we shot to make sure that it was calibrated well. So I've now moved into the role that's more so, okay, guys, here's what's next. Kind of calling back to everybody. The person running their mouth on the mic, I'm sure everybody loves that. That's me now. Sorry, guys. So that's the role on set. And then in post, you're the person that's making sure that everything's coming together, because there are so many things that often happen on set, things you have to kind of in the moment compensate for, that has to then be communicated to the animators. Say, hey, we did this. Sorry, here's why. Frankenstein these 3 components together and you'll get what you need. So that's often now that person having to take all that information and bestow it upon everybody else who was just kind of sitting and waiting, So that's that role to kind of carry it through. There's often an involvement in pre-production for a shoot that the supervisor gets to be a part of, like help a client plan out. Like oftentimes clients that have never used motion capture, it's similar to what you just talked about. They don't know what they need.
Yeah.
They don't know how it's accomplished. They
Mhm.
they know what they want the final result to be, and we need to be able to translate how you actually execute that type of thing, or the things that you don't need to actually worry about that are handled later. Like it's kind
Mhm.
of there's a bit of an educational role
Yeah.
with the supervisor in that case. And then for virtual production, that's such a big catch-all term. I've been giving talks about what that actually means, because
Mhm.
I think with The Mandalorian and Disney, I think that's when a lot of people started to hear the term virtual production and started to
Okay.
associate it with media walls and
Mhm.
what that production did. But they were doing virtual production on the first Avatar movie, on Polar Express.
Mhm.
It's been around for a long time. It's really about visualizing um, effects and any type of post-production work that you would typically only see in post while you're shooting. So it
Okay.
could be like the live replacement of a background simply.
Mhm.
Once you've been able to do that, it requires, tracking your camera, aligning everything up. You've now kind of gone into the world of virtual production.
Yeah.
Um, so it's the media wall is just, another major tool
Yeah.
within that wheelhouse, or another major workflow that you have to consider. So the virtual production supervisor is also on stage, in particular, working with multiple departments, making sure everything is in sync. Like sound
Mhm.
department usually has the master clock. They're the ones that are determining jam points for time code amongst all departments. It's the virtual production supervisor that's trying to vie for more time from the assistant director. Like, we need 30 more seconds to get ready. Like that's that person. The
Yeah.
one that's also saying, hey, there's a giant fan coming in that's going to block this camera from this side. We need to move and restructure. So
Yeah.
they're also kind of, calling out the craziness that's happening on set and trying to make sense of that for everybody. That's usually behind the curtain.
Mhm.
But yeah, virtual production, I think, is as a whole is what we're moving towards. Like I see a lot of stages and a lot of sets becoming virtual production sets, even if they're only using an aspect of um, or a certain workflow within that tool belt. It's
Yeah.
still, I think that's just going to be what we're going to call most productions nowadays. Like
Nice.
something's going to be in that category, even if it's just, like I said, background replacement,
Mhm.
virtual production.
So, I'm just gonna list some projects that you've worked on. I do that just so people can know Black people worked on some of your favorite stuff. So you worked on and I get ridiculous with it, so don't worry. But anyway, Middle Earth, Shadow of Mordor, which is a video game, Call of Duty Advanced War video game, Halo 5 Guardians video game, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, Warcraft, The Great Wall, Thor Ragnarok. I don't know if I mispronounced.
No,
Sorry.
you're good. You're good.
I'm like, I'm not a Marvel person. Oh, Black Panther, Avengers, Infinity War, Welcome to Morrowind, Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man, Far From Home. This is what was on your IMDb. So that's
It's true.
awesome.
It's accurate. That's true.
So, can you talk about what was your biggest breakthrough in your career so
Yeah.
far?
Yeah. I think so. My first time on set was Thor Ragnarok. And I think
Mhm.
that's what really changed. That's what really kind of put me where I am now.
Mhm.
It was from that show, getting into the Marvel family, that you really made all the contacts that you would never have had if you were only at the computer.
Yeah.
That changed everything.
Mhm.
That's what allowed me to look to Sweden, to the company I'm at now, to come back to be. I'm getting headhunted all the time because of those credits. I think it's being on stage is what really changed everything,
Mhm.
because that's what also puts you in front of the vis effects supervisors at all these major studios,
Mhm.
and then that they remember you. Your team does a good job. As a female in a technical role, I stood
Mhm.
out. As a Black person on stage at all, you stood out.
Mhm.
Like, it's definitely something that, like, people remembered me because I was different in the role I was in. So that
Mhm.
definitely changed everything. Thor Ragnarok was down in Australia, so that was also my first time uh, traveling like that. And I was there for 6 months. So I got to live there. It was really
Nice.
amazing. Yeah, that was an incredible life experience as well
Mhm.
as a career change or a pivotal moment in my career there.
Mhm.
And I was learning how to operate the software on stage. Like I showed up with about a week of rehearsals before that first shot with Ruffalo, and we were like, I was like, I have to learn this in a week. This is crazy. I've got to shoot a whole movie. Like this isn't just rehearsal. This is nuts. So
Mhm.
I remember those first couple weeks, I was just a ball of stress. And then it became really, really cool after that very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot. But yeah, that was, I think, the big moment because I afterwards I was still coming home back to the office, still doing post-production, but with a
Mhm.
completely different perspective. I understood both ends of the workflow, which I
Mhm.
think then improved the back end because I understood the front end. I understood where
Yeah.
this data was coming from. And I was able to better communicate. I was learning, you go through film school, you hear about different departments and roles and whatnot, but when you're there, you're actually seeing everybody operate. For some reason, I totally forgot everything I learned about the hierarchy within other departments, like who's the best boy and the first ACs, which one, and like I lost. It was just like a blur seeing people actually doing that in
Yeah.
person. So I think that was one of the biggest learning experiences I ever had. Really, was
Mhm.
with that first show.
Have you ever? I mean, have you gotten the opportunity to go anywhere else international?
Yeah. So when my partner, who's also doing motion capture, when he was in Canada, I got to go up there and be on. And when he was on the Welcome to Marwen set,
Mhm.
I got to go visit him. I was doing most of the post production for that show.
Mhm.
And then together, after leaving Profile Studios, we went over to Goodbye Kansas, where we are now, and spent the first 9 months living in Stockholm,
Nice.
getting that used to that company at their headquarters, kind of meeting the teams. We came in as mocap specialists to kind of work with their current department. So we're still with the company back in LA, but that's been the majority of the travel I've been able to do. And I appreciate that kind of travel because you really get to experience a full culture. Like it's
Yeah.
nice to visit places, but there's
Yeah.
nothing like living somewhere for a while. You
Yeah.
have a different perspective entirely. So yeah, I think that's been tremendous. And ideally, if things come together, I can't talk about them. There's some more traveling coming up in the future to new places. So
Nice.
add a couple continents to the belt, I hope. So yeah.
Yeah, after I lived in South Korea, I would definitely suggest any American to kind of
Mm,
live internationally because you kind of get a understanding that there's multiple ways to live and they be correct.
yes,
Like
yes.
the American way of living is not the only way to live.
Right. I would love to visit Korea. That's on my list. That sounds
Yeah.
amazing. Where were you there?
I went there to teach English
Okay.
my first year, so I was in Gwangju, which is in Jeollanam-do in the southwest, because there's a
Okay.
Gwangju in the northeast. And then I was in Seoul my second year. I worked for an animation company.
That's really cool.
So what did you
Wow.
like about the different cultures of like Sweden and Australia?
Australia first, I guess. That was the first major experience. I
Hmm.
noticed like it's Australia is like about the size of the States,
Hmm.
but there's less than the amount of people in LA County in the whole country, right? So it's like it's a paradise over there. It's just the environment is gorgeous.
Hmm.
I was up in Brisbane,
Hmm.
which is I guess a climate more similar to Florida or California. Like Denver got
Hmm.
it's very cold in the winter. I was there, but I just noticed that the people there are like there's much more of a relaxed
Yeah.
feel. Like
Hmm.
everybody seems a lot more cool. I noticed that right away people were um, excited and encouraged to meet you and talk. And it's definitely a very international country.
Hmm.
A lot of people from China there, a lot of people from India there. That was beautiful to see.
Hmm.
Um, but I loved the environment there. Like you drive like 20 minutes out of the city and you're like in the jungle up a mountain. Like it was amazing. Like it was really cool to see people that cared a lot about their environment. You could tell that everything was kind of catered to keeping the
Hmm.
place clean and as pristine and as lovely as it has been for so long.
Yeah.
Um, I also got to visit just for a few days over New Zealand, and that
Hmm.
was like, we of course, we did the Lord of the Rings thing. That was a dream, but it was really cool to see that part of the country or that part of the world, because there's something very similar. It felt very at home in Australia. There's something very similar there to the
Mhm.
States.
Mhm.
We're driving on the other side of the road. You know, the currency is still the dollar, even though there's a different rate there, but
Yeah.
everybody's speaking English. There's something very familiar about that environment. Versus in Sweden, like everybody knows English, but everybody's speaking Swedish around you. Like that was definitely completely different. I
Yeah.
think especially as a language, it's so different from English and from the other things that you're exposed to in the States that
Yeah.
alone was a big thing. So, but there, I was using public transpo, like really for the first time there, especially being in
Mhm.
Atlanta. It's so much more of a car state, you know?
Yeah.
So getting used to the buses and the trains and, you know, learning very specific Swedish words to get around and to order menus. Like that was a fun experience for that reason, because it was the first place I was where English wasn't the default everywhere you
Yeah.
went. But it was, I think, the biggest thing there that was so different. Like the work culture was very nice. Everybody was very welcoming at work. But I also noticed like it's gets dark in the winter at like
Mhm.
2:30 in the afternoon,
Oh
and the
man.
sun doesn't come up. If it does, it comes up at 10 in the morning for like an hour. Like that was, and then but we got there in midsummer when the sun never went down. And so like the jet lag was crazy at
Yeah.
first because you don't know what day it is anyway. So I think that was just environmentally such a different experience that it definitely affected. You could see how it affects people's moods. Even
Yeah.
if people talk
Mhm.
about it, it's not like just an outsider looking in. Like people there were talking about how everybody's gets kind of down in the winter because it's dark all the time. Everybody's very excited and very, you know, enthusiastic in the summertime. And
Mhm.
there's definitely culturally their schedule's a bit different from North America, as even in Australia. Like
Mhm.
there's definitely you know, nationwide vacation time that happens in the
Yeah.
summertime and the holidays, which changes the production schedule a bit. So that took some getting used to, just to understand like what a work-life balance feels like, you
Yeah.
know, like, oh, we get to have some time off. What does that mean? You know, so not a bad thing to experience, just a
Right.
very different thing to experience.
Which on the other hand, when I worked at the animation company, I only got 3 vacation days a year, which
Right.
luckily I only worked there for 1 year.
Right.
But,
Still.
yeah, being in a country where English is not the main language, it's like every day you leave your house is an adventure.
Yeah. Everything. It's a big deal. Yeah.
But luckily I learned how to read Korean, so I could get around Korea much better than anywhere, like, because the public transportation system is so awesome.
Hmm.
I can get anywhere in the country as long as I can read and know where I'm going. Like, okay, I can take this long distance bus here. I can take the subway, blah blah. Blah.
That's
So,
cool. Yeah.
can
So important.
you talk about the opportunity to do the Unreal Fellowship for virtual production? What project did you focus on, and how did it help you in your career?
Yeah, that was really great.
Mhm.
I After Profile Studios kind of dissolved, some of the people that were more senior employees there went over to Epic, and I heard about the program through them. Like, hey, you should apply. This makes
Mhm.
sense, you know. So yeah, that was really cool to go in. I made some amazing connections, people I'm still working with from that program. But I think that was invaluable to be able to learn from the people that wrote the
Yeah.
engine. Like that's crazy. That's it's great to have those people as personal connections now, because I was using the engine a lot on set as a visualization tool. I had taken a class or two in school back when it was even before the current versions of Unreal. So I had
Yeah.
an idea of what to do in there, but it was amazing to really kind of start over. I loved university, so it was nice to be in a class, you know, like I appreciate that kind of structure. Um, but I think it was just amazing to go through everything that you would need for preparing for a virtual production shoot or a cinematic,
Mhm.
things that were focused more on that as opposed to game logic specifically. You know,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
nice to see as a digital creation tool what can Unreal do. And as a real-time renderer, that was amazing. So our prompt was to do like a chase scene for
Mm-hmm.
our final. Some people did more creative projects, and I was one of those. I was the nerd that followed the prompts. I'll do my chasing. You know, I kind of wish I had maybe done a little bit something else, because
Yeah.
for me it was a lot of animation to put together.
Yeah.
And I wasn't familiar with the animation tools before within
Mm-hmm.
Unreal, so that was definitely a big learning curve. But I from what my computer was allowing me to do, I think I did a good. I learned a lot. You know, I as soon as it was over, I was looking up new hardware. Like, I need to upgrade. I want to be able to do the ray tracing and then the baking in the stuff and all the really cool things. You know, so it made me want to upgrade afterwards to
Yeah.
continue. But I since then I'm now able to give some introductory talks to my current company for people that don't know Unreal. Like,
Mm-hmm.
here's the basics, like introductory classes and stuff. So I've been
Yeah.
able to take that knowledge and immediately pass it on to people, create like a little curriculum. Because it's between that and what exists on the Unreal learning site, you can learn it from scratch. It's such an amazing tool that they give away for free for people to learn. It's nuts. Like, learn it if you don't know it already. Like, you're crazy to not jump into it. You know, it's
Yeah.
going to be used so much. But yeah, that experience was wonderful. I'm so impressed that they're doing that. There were 100 of us in my class, so when
Mm-hmm.
they let people in, they're letting in about 100 people at a time. So
Okay.
I think it's important because it's an amazing way to evangelize to people in all different types of roles.
Yeah.
And all different types of technical roles. Like, we were meeting, the networking opportunities were incredible for that reason too, because there's people in industries you never thought about that would need to use these tools that now I know the supervisor over here or the producer over there. So
Yeah.
that was great. Yeah.
So I know you stated earlier that you've been pretty lucky as far as your experience in the South, but
Mm.
how has being Black, a Black woman, or any other ism impacted you in your visual effects career?
Yeah. I think um, what's interesting about that is you think about some of the stereotypes that people have
Mm-hmm.
about Black women in general. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
hear these things, and I almost find myself acting differently so that people can't try to use some type of excuse or blame me for some type of behavior. Like, oh, why are you getting so like heated up about this? Like, why are you like, why are you overreacting? Like, why are you getting so like, calm down? Like, I've been told to calm down or slow down or like
Mm-hmm.
all that, like, and I think that sometimes I'm like, you wouldn't say this to anybody on your team, like, just because I'm getting impassioned about something because I see something wrong and I'm like, guys, we can't do this. And I get very, very, you know, I more on a soapbox than normal. Like, I tend to be more like, even keel part of the team. But when I am like that, I'm often told to calm down, let it go. And I think that kind of thing might have to do with how I look.
Yeah.
I think people kind of make those assumptions right away. But I noticed that as a woman in particular,
Mm-hmm.
and I've noticed this from other females, not just Black females, but other females in general, we are often not given the benefit of the doubt when it comes to doing um, like working with equipment, for example.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm always like, I've been building computers since middle school. Like, like, that's something I've been doing for a long time. And whenever someone needs to, like, hey, can you take that video card out? Like, can you call so-and-so over to help you take that out? I'm like, no, I can do it. Like, why wouldn't you just ask me if I can do it first? Like, there's always that kind of thing.
Right.
Or like, we're moving equipment around and you go to pick something up. Oh no, let me help you. Like, I got this. Like, there's like, I'm a pretty large lady. Like, I can pick things up. Like, I got this. So I think there's often that you experience as a lady. And then there are times where you have to take more of a like, I need some more help. Like, there are times where that actually does come up, and you sometimes maybe feel awkward asking for help or asking for that extra day off if you're not feeling like that happens. Like,
Yeah.
there are times where being a woman does come into play and does affect your ability to work, and you try to find ways to ask for the help without having it affect your reputation or having
Yeah.
somebody see you or judge you like, oh, it's, she's just being a lady today. So I think that's the problem. Like, if I get very, very frustrated, like, I have to like go to the bathroom if I'm starting to tear up. Like, it's like, I don't want anybody to see me emote that way. But sometimes as a female, you do emote that way more so than men. And that's just, those types of things are what make a team more dynamic. I think those are the perspectives that teams need to really excel. But those are also the things that sometimes get in the way of you being able to be you, because you're worried about how these things might come off. In my experience, I think I've experienced or felt different as a woman more so as a Black person. I think that's come up more so in my role, because maybe it's just a roll of the dice, but I've always been on very international crews.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of, it's been more about being the only girl in the room oftentimes than the only minority in the room, which kind of has changed my experience just a bit.
Yeah, I know. I was working at one company, and I had just like worked on in South Korea on like Family Guy and Cleveland Show, and then I'm like at this company stateside, and I was examining a 3D model in Maya, and the artist had pink wheels, and then my coworker was like, "Are you sure the wheels are pink? Are you not sure? Is it like a light or something?" I'm like, "I have a whole degree in this, and I just worked at a company, and you're still in school. Why are you questioning me?" Like, I don't understand. Like,
Yeah.
I know what I'm talking about. The wheels are pink. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
yeah.
Stop questioning my notes. I can show you, but why are you questioning me anyway?
It's like you have to keep proving your expertise.
Yeah.
And you feel like you look around and you're not everybody's going through that. It's I've had to, like, I was doing survey on movie sets to make sure that we were giving very precise measurements, and then I go use like a tape measure, and they're like, "Are you sure you're reading that right?" Yes, I am. Like, what do you mean? Like, why am I having to prove this to you?
Tape measure, or like, because like, what other way is there to read tape?
Right. Like, what do you mean?
Is it that difficult of a device? Like,
yes, it's metric, but I got a calculator. Like, I understand what I'm doing. Like, yeah, you have to. It's weird. These are things that I shouldn't have to, like, especially as you progress. Like, I shouldn't have to keep proving this. Like, I'm like you said,
like,
I'm
in
not a
leadership
student.
roles, do you know the same thing, or
sometimes I still sometimes do. Especially if you're meeting people for the first time, that your position puts you above them within the hierarchy. To like have to say, like, kind of remind them, like, well, I am a supervisor. Or like, this isn't my first rodeo. Like, I'm trying to find like how do I say these things without being
the angry Black woman?
yeah, thank you. Like, what can I do to not emote that way, but emote that way? Like, I had, like, there's power to that.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
You're expected to be cool in their ridiculousness.
Yes, exactly. Like, maybe sarcasm and a little bit of like, all right, guy, like, maybe that'll be the way that gets through to you, because if I emote the way that my inner voice is emoting, it's just gonna hit a wall, and I think that's part of the acting, part of the, can you put on the face and the voice you need to put on in this moment with this person to get what you need out of them. And that is oftentimes more of a challenge for certain people.
Yeah. So what are some cool developments that are happening in the VFX industry?
So I'm seeing a lot of machine learning solutions coming down the line, and that's going to be crazy, because I hear a lot of people going, "Oh, it's going to take my job. Like, what do I do now?" But I think that's going to really up the ability to be more creative and more flexible with what is being shot and where people decide to tell their stories. I think that's going to be exciting, being able to do, like, especially looking at, once again, motion capture being the focus of mine. Using machine learning to analyze footage so that I don't have to put the performer in a certain outfit in order to get their data. Like, that's going to be crazy, because then we can actually just replace or just add to scenes without having to break the actor's immersion into that scene. something that
Mhm.
always came up was, once the actor puts on the, you know, the Velcro onesie, and they put all the markers all over them, and they have the head cam on their face, and they've got all these wires all over them. You don't feel like you're that character anymore. Like, you have to
Yeah.
really, really immerse yourself to feel like you're back to square one. So I think being able to go in that direction is going to really change what we can do. And then looking at all the media wall technology, being able to have more advanced ways of checking your camera, being able
Mhm.
to integrate things faster into the scene,
Yeah.
more being able to put more high end, more finished looking effects on your foreground and background, like if you're doing on an XR stage, putting things in front of people. That immersion into the set is really going to change. And I think as soon as we're able to really allow the actors to see the visual effects without it
Mhm.
interfering with what they're wearing, it's going to
Yeah.
change everything.
Yeah.
Like I think that's going to be just the coolest thing ever. But I think we're getting there. I think a lot of it has to do with, how do we do this safely? How do we
Mhm.
not like irradiate our actors by surrounding them with all this equipment? Like at a certain point, you have to think that these are people standing around all of these different wireless signals. Like, is this okay? So we have to
Yeah.
like, what's the safest way to do this? What's
Yeah.
a cost effective way to do this? How do we, go out into the jungle and do something similar? Like,
Mhm.
those are going to be the really amazing solutions that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Like not sacrificing precision for innovation, I think is also important. Because a
Yeah.
lot of new tools are coming out, but they're not as precise as the original methods. People go back to the original methods. So
Yeah.
we got to find a way to bridge that gap.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um. So as a you're kind of in getting into your career, becoming a leader, have you decided your purpose in regards to blackness and black professionals in VFX?
I feel like the main thing that I've been trying to do is well, I think what's different about our experience is that we don't often have all of the familial connections, all of
Mm.
the the history of people within this industry, because a lot of people get the kind of experience and kind of opportunities that they get because, you know, a family member or somebody that they know already is in these roles. I think that what we can start to do, and what I've been trying to do, is is recommend people and give
Mhm.
people opportunities that wouldn't have otherwise heard about them, because of the role I'm in. I think that's the main thing we can do. Like, the reason I'm meeting you is because of somebody I met in the fellowship that is also looking out for his fellow Black animators, and
Mhm.
it's like because of that, also that same experience and that same networking opportunity. I'm working with somebody else who's doing a very inclusive educational initiative to get people that are underrepresented into the
Mhm.
industry and trained up. I think that's what we can do more of.
Yeah.
Like I was trying to give opportunities to people on our Avengers set, like teach, like, hey, come over here, let me teach you what I'm doing. I'm
Yeah.
not just going to give you instructions. And there was one friend of mine that I know, I was working with him. We were going over survey, then in another
Mhm.
state, because he learned that with me, he was able to do more LiDAR scanning, and now he's like a producer coordinator at a company doing this because he was able to get these experiences on stage. And I think it's important to seek people out and bring them over and teach them,
Yeah.
like open people's eyes to the possibilities and the experience and the opportunities that are actually there, and
Mhm.
teach them that they are capable to do these things. Because I think a lot of the problem we have within the Black community is the access to resources.
Yeah.
Like I talked about earlier, I'm aware that um, I was in a privileged place to be able to have access to high-end equipment as a high schooler because
Yeah.
of where I lived,
Mhm.
because I wasn't in other parts of Atlanta where the funding wasn't there. And I think
Mhm.
that, even though I was able to have that, a lot of people that were just as talented didn't have that opportunity. So what do we do now? Like, how do
Yeah.
we level that playing field? So that's the most that I'm empowered to do currently, is to give people opportunities, or offer training opportunities, like
Yeah.
teach classes, like open these things online. Like, you can there's there's websites where you can just sign up, and people have some like webinars, and they just teach things, like to let people know that they have the option to really broaden their horizons, is the most the most that a lot of us can do, really.
Yeah.
Spread that education around a bit, you know.
Yeah, it makes me think of Hidden Figures in Octavia Spencer's character, where nobody knew how to use the Fortran thing, I think. And then she's like, let me give these women like job security and teach them all how to use this computer.
Yeah. It's so important. It's people that are going to excel at this, and they just weren't given the chance to try it. Like, yeah, I think we have to do that for each other, you know.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's not just there are minorities in general that need these experiences. Like, part of creating that strong community is bringing everybody up. And I think that it's important that we are able to use our experiences to empower other Black people, to empower everybody around them as well.
Yeah.
You know, like, spread that wealth around. And I think the important thing is just the more we do that, the less out of the ordinary we will seem in these roles. And I think that's when we really have a breakthrough. You know, as beautiful as these talks are, as amazing as it is to be able to network, it shouldn't be an exceptional thing in the first place. Like ideally, eventually, this isn't something that we have to even think about anymore. Like we need to all be able to just kind of continue moving forward together. And I think that should be everybody's goal in the big picture. You know?
Right. What do you hope that Black people in animation are doing in the current landscape that either you wish you could have done, you wish you could do, or that you actually are doing?
I've seen, especially looking at some of the new artistic styles that are coming out, that there's a new, I can't, the title of it escapes me. I just saw it the other day. It looks like a Black female lead as like a martial artist, and
Master Jamal Bradley.
Yes, and it looks like the artistic style of Spider-Man. Like that animation reminds me of that. I'm excited by these stories and being able to be a part of these productions, like something that I hope to be able to be a part of. You know, I think because I noticed that those crews, like, or even you think of Coco, for example, had a very large Latino crew working on that movie. I think it's really amazing to see these beautiful, these stories that are focused on specific cultures, and you have people from those cultures working on these films and telling their own stories. I think that's what's really amazing is that we're getting to the point where we have enough people in the industry to be able to amass these crews, so that you do have a more authentic way to tell the story. Something that I think in the past they've critiqued Disney on some of these things in the past. Like, you didn't have the representation, you do the story, it's kind of missing the mark. So I think that's something that we can do more of, is being able to tell our own story, being able to work together to write characters and to affect the way that they're being portrayed in a more real way. Even writing female characters has been a problem for a very long time. Like, no one would ever say that. No one would ever act that way. Like, I think we need to work together to make sure that everyone's represented properly. And that's true of minorities in all aspects. You talk about gender minorities, you talk about, ethnic minorities. It's everything. Like, I think it's important that we are able to feel empowered to tell our stories and not judged for doing so.
Yeah. So if someone was producing a documentary about you, what things would you want them to highlight about your life outside of your work in visual effects?
I would definitely say my family. They've been very close with my parents and my sister my whole life, and that's definitely shaped who I am and what I care about. I think that's very important to highlight, for sure. Just how involved we are with each other. I don't know. That's a really good question. That's a curveball, I think. Because I feel like so many of my hobbies and whatnot kind of relate back to what I do. Like I'm into the tech. I'm into the video gaming. I 3D print. I'm reading the journal. Like, that's just, it's kind of my thing, So it's kind of all like, even I also like knit and crochet, which is just like analog 3D printing, you know, like that's just not there's not a lot of like things that are really unique, I guess, or like kind of exceptional about what I do outside of work. It's really about, to me, I focus a lot on my family. I focus a lot on being a part of their lives, and I try to focus on, you know, keeping up on what I do to be able to be the best I can at work. So that's kind of, I guess that's the main thing.
Yeah. Something funny about crocheting. So my stepmom gave me a book on how to crochet when I was like 9 years old. And so, okay, so this is like how, you know, there's 10 different types of personalities of people. So I'm one of those people where like the hard stuff is sometimes easy and then the easy stuff is sometimes hard. So I remember reading this book and I was like making hats, purses, house shoes. Like they weren't good. Like they were like 2 different size house shoes and like stuff. And like, I mean, but I didn't make, like, I started crocheting when I was 9. I didn't make a scarf till college.
Right.
Like a scarf is usually the first thing.
Right. It's just flat. Like, yeah.
It's like one of my friends in college was like, "Can you make me a scarf?" I was like, "Sure." And then I was like 20 and making a scarf for the first time when I learned how to crochet when I was 9.
It's so funny. You just dove right in. I love it.
Yeah, I was like, let me go for these elaborate things that I wasn't using patterns or anything. I just was like freestyling. So when I would make a hat, I'd just be like, zoop, 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 zoop. Okay, put this in here.
Right. That's great. I love that. That is definitely not the easiest way to start.
But I don't know. That's just
That's
naturally how I approached it. And I just think that's hilarious. Like, another thing that shows that is there's this like website called Wyzant, WYZANT. It's like a tutoring site. And you take tests to be able to tutor people, and I like passed the geometry and algebra, but I failed the elementary math. And then you can't never take the tests again. So like I can never tutor in elementary math because I failed it.
Like, is she cheating? What is this? Like, how did she do that?
I went up to calculus in high school, but like, elementary math is just too hard. I think I was just going too fast.
You just don't need it anymore. You've bypassed it. You know, you've moved on to the more advanced thing. It's fine.
That's just such an interesting thing about my personality. I'm like, yes, go for the hard things. Easy stuff, that is difficult.
Well, I mean, but I can imagine in the workplace it being so valuable because it's like you're going to pinpoint and solve the most important thing first, and then everybody else can handle the easy stuff. That's great. Yeah.
I know some guy told me I had an engineering mind. I was like, well, I was going to become an electrical engineer before I found animation. So
there you go. There you go.
It's a positive in some ways.
For sure. I'd say so. Yeah.
So where can people follow you, or what's your website?
I have JenniferMcSpadden.com. It's mostly where I have a reel and some version of my current resume. I'm mostly on LinkedIn. And I'm on Instagram. I've got the gram. Yeah, you know, there's some random stuff there.
Yeah.
I've got a Facebook from ages ago because I was starting college when it was brand new. Like, have you heard of the Facebook? You know, so I have one. But
when it used to have at the beginning.
Right, the face, right. Back when, MySpace was the preferred one, Facebook was the new kid. So I have that, but mostly LinkedIn, Instagram, and like I said, my site is kind of just a quick link to my reel. So there's not much on that right now. I need to get back into that and spruce that up a bit. But yeah, just the full name on both of those things. But I have links to that on the website too.
Cool. Well, thank you for coming on my platform and sitting down with me. Black woman, Black woman, Black woman.
Thank you so much.
And to everyone, and to everyone out there, I want you to like So I Know It's Real, comment and tell me how you feel, subscribe to Soda Deal, and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.
Thank you.